Okay, and now I will do the welcome spiel, the official welcome spiel. So thank you for joining me this afternoon. My name is Allison Pryor. I'm here at WLS, and today we are going to be talking about Evergreen Patrons. So throughout this training, we're going to be covering quite a bit of information. So if at any point you need me to repeat myself, slow down, if you have the ability to unmute yourself, you are more than welcome to do so, or you can add your question or comment into the chat feature because I will be checking that. I am also going to be sending this recording to you, if not later today, before the end of the week, and I will also be sharing the PowerPoint presentation with you as well. Before we jump in, I do recognize a couple of names here. So I know that you guys might be seasoned vets, but I'm curious to know if anyone's comfortable sharing what was your motivation for signing up today. Does anyone want to volunteer?
This is Marcia Edelstein.
Hi.
I'm at the Pelham Library. I've been there almost 5 years. I took
Okay.
either this session or something similar a few years ago. I think I have different issues now. And, there are just some questions about some of the peculiarities of Evergreen
Okay. Yeah.
that I'm curious.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. As if throughout the training, if you know that matches up with what you are having peculiarities with, unmute yourself. Let me know because we'll get that covered. And if not, then we'll just address that afterwards. In my experience with Evergreen training, it's not unusual for staff to maybe do one or two trainings and then they pretty much teach themselves from there on. And that is a valid way to learn Evergreen. That's how I learned Evergreen. But these trainings are an opportunity for everyone to get their questions answered and maybe to fill in the gaps that grow when we are teaching ourselves all of the materials as well. So, with that being said, I'm going to start sharing my screen. I'm going to be starting off in a PowerPoint, but then we are going to be switching gears and then working within Evergreen itself. And then we will also at the end be taking a look at the IT Wiki and as well as another documentation source for you guys to use as a resource later on. Okay, and let me just adjust my menu tabs because that's going to drive me crazy if I don't do that now. All right. So, Evergreen patrons, who gets a card in Westchester? So, anyone who lives, works, goes to school, or owns property in Westchester County is eligible for a library card. Westchester Library System, while we are a system, we have 38 member libraries, and then we have 43 locations if you include those library branches. Even though everyone is a part of Westchester Library System, every library does have its own culture and they have their own identity, and some of them do have their own policies. When policies are pushed or enforced by the system, it's not Westchester Library System making those policies. Usually these are conceived in a committee, typically the circulation committee, and then everything gets voted on and approved by PLDA, the Public Libraries Directors Association. So it's very much a group effort with all of these rules or guidelines with how we use Evergreen throughout Westchester. That being said, there is no official age restrictions for patrons. It's up to the individual libraries to decide the earliest age for patrons to sign up for a card. I know in my own speaking with library staff, some are perfectly happy with a baby getting their first library card, and having mom and dad sign for it. And other locations prefer that the child at least be able to sign their name on the application. So if you're not sure about the age restrictions or if you're not sure about anything and how it applies to your library, my number one rule is just to ask. Ask your head of CERC, ask your supervisor, and just find out what's the best practice for your location. Every desktop staff desktop has a library service area viewer. some people keep this bookmarked. There should be an icon on your desktop. And this also helps determine the correct home library for your patron. We do have some libraries that serve towns that don't have their own library. For example, I live in Cortland Manor. So there is no library just for Cortland Manor. I can go to the John C. Hart Memorial Library in Yorktown. I can go to the Croton Free Library. I can go to the Hendrick Hudson Library in Montrose, or I can go to the Field Library in Peekskill. But if I were to walk into any of those libraries and give them my ID with my Cortland Manor residence, they may need to open up this library service area viewer and type in my address to really find, figure out which one is the best option for me. So how this works, if you haven't used it before, you simply type in the patron's address. So I will just type in mine just to show you what it looks like. Actually, I'm going to show, let's not dox myself. I'm going to put in the address for Westchester Library System office because we work in Elmsford. And Elmsford also does not have its own site-specific location. Dexter Road. Okay, and it's analyzing me. And so based on this library service area viewer, it's saying that Greenburgh makes the most sense for me to go to. So if you're ever unsure, this is always a great tool. Some libraries also use school districts to determine that. I know because I work at Peekskill, the Peekskill Field Library, we take a look with contract patrons that live in Cortland Manor. We see which school district do they fall in line with, and that also determines whether or not they get a specific patron stat cat or what have you. So again, this is a perfect example of if you're not sure, just ask someone at your location. Also, when it comes to patrons having cards, one thing that I do want to make sure gets stressed is that patrons should only have one library card registered to them. So I am not talking about staff, library staff, I'm talking about patrons. So even if they live in one town and work in the other and they go to both of those libraries, they should still only have one Westchester library card. Patrons can use their library cards at any Westchester Public Library. There are going to be certain restrictions, typically with the materials that can be loaned out to patrons. So one of the first things that I think of when it comes to those restrictions is museum passes. Typically, libraries only want their patrons to be able to use those museum passes. So just because I go to the Mount Pleasant Library every day after work, but I belong to the Warner Library, that doesn't necessarily mean I can just walk into Mount Pleasant and ask to check out their museum passes. However, I can check out, an item off their shelf, or I can use their computers. Okay. So now we're talking about staff. Well, if we live and work in Westchester, library staff are the exception. We can have more than one library card. We can have a personal library card for our home library, and then we can have a card for our job. So if I live in Cortland Manor and my library card is for Yorktown, but I work in Elmford, I work in Greenburgh, I have a staff card for WLS. And the reason why we want that is because when we work in libraries, oftentimes we are using our cards to place holds or check out materials, whether it's for programs or displays. So we do want to keep those things separate. Now, if you were to look yourself up in Evergreen, you will see, if you have a staff card and a personal card, you will see those listed, but you're also going to see a third listing. So in that card column in the Evergreen patron search screen, You'll see barcodes for a card, but then you also may see your name. So whenever we see that, that is not an actual barcode. That is our Evergreen staff username, and that's how we create our workstations. You'll also see this if you're placing holds in the catalog and you're logged in, and you'll see an option to place a hold for your workstation username. And it's not recommended to do that because it doesn't go anywhere. It's not an actual barcode. This is your Active Directory name, and it's also your Evergreen username. So avoid clicking on this profile. And actually, there's blocks applied to this profile, so it can't be used for holds or checkouts. Now, we also, because we are the greatest library system in New York State, we have a lot of interested patrons that don't live, work, go to school, or own property in Westchester, but want to have a card. And we at WLS, me at WLS, service those people. We have applications on the Westchester Library System website, and a link to this application is also in the IT Wiki. We do charge for these cards. So we do a yearly renewal, and we charge $75 for patrons that are 65 and younger, or we have a discounted rate of $35 for anyone that is 65 and older, or anyone that's living with a disability. Essentially, they just fill out this application and they mail a check made out to Westchester Library System, and they mail it to our office. You may have patrons come into your library. Maybe they live in the Bronx and they want a card. If they want to get a library card, you're going to have them fill out a non-resident application. If they have any questions, they can call me at WLS. I believe my phone number is on that application, and so is my email. And I'm always happy to explain how this works. When those patrons are registered, they have a fee profile, and that just should signify to library staff that they are paying to use Westchester Library System services. They do get a physical card that gets mailed to them. And typically, a lot of these people do not live in New York at all. So they're really just using it for our online digital resources. However, we do have a lot of Bronx residents that like to use our friends down in Yonkers or Bronxville, sometimes Pelham. And I know that sometimes, depending on where they live in the border of Westchester and the Bronx, some libraries may be willing to give them a card. And if they're not willing to give them a card, that's when you send them to me, and then we'll get them sorted. Are there any questions about staff cards or out-of-county library cards? Okay. I'm taking a look at the chat and I see Patty says, recently we noticed when we click on the library service area, it asks for a login. Is that viewer up to date? I thought Elmsford patrons were Ardsley contract 3. You know, Patty, that's a good question. Obviously, as you see, I wasn't prompted for a login, but I was doing it through the Westchester website. If you're doing it through the icon on your desktop, I think I am going to touch base with Michael Petroselli, who works in IT with me here. And he's the one that's in charge of making sure all of those addresses fall within the right lines. And then he'll also be able to let me know about the login. So if you haven't submitted a ticket about that, if you don't mind sending in one to the help desk, that would be helpful. That way I can say, I can assign that to him. Okay. All right. Patron profile. So I just mentioned the fee patron profile and the staff patron profile, but there's quite a few patron profiles, even though we're typically only using adult or juvenile or teen when we register our patrons. So patron profiles are essentially essentially determine how patrons can our use our materials and place holds and enjoy our services. So they are going to be based on, or they're going to determine when the account will expire. So typically, it's typically a 3-year period. However, there are exceptions, and some profiles will expire after a year. Profiles also determine how many items patrons can check out, how many holds they can place, and the maximum number of fines that they can accrue. So, as I mentioned, 3 years is the typical expiration period, but then we have our other thresholds. So, our hold threshold, our bill threshold, and our items out threshold. Once patrons hit those thresholds, blocks are automatically applied to their cards. So, we have a hold limit that was increased from 25 to 35 holds for a patron's profile. So, if they were to place 36 holds, Evergreen would block them. A block does not prevent patrons from placing holds. So a patron can still log in through the app or the OPAC and place holds for themselves with a block on their card. But when they come in to pick up that hold at the library, that's when we have the opportunity to ask them to, like, okay, look, you've reached this threshold, or you owe more than $25. Let's get this taken care of before we check out to you. The whole idea is so we can at least get them to come into the library to have that conversation. As you're looking, if you are looking at this profile grid, you'll see that there are certain profiles that you may not typically be using or aware of, and that's okay. Because like I said, when we register patrons, we're typically using adult, teen, or juvenile, but we do have things like courtesy or guest or temp, internet only, PC use, homebound, Pi. That's for outreach services. And those will typically have differing expiration periods. So this profile grid is available on the IT Wiki. It's available in a couple of places, but I have it in the Evergreen Patrons page specifically for quick reference. Okay. Also, when it comes to determining who fits into a juvenile or a teen card, it's typically juvenile is 12 years and younger, and then teen is between 12 and 18. For our guest profiles, it's recommended to use it for patrons that are visiting Westchester. Maybe they're staying at their mom's for a couple of weeks and they want to use the library, or patrons that have a transient living status. So typically someone that may be staying in a shelter for a period of time. And if I go back, for the guest profile, that expires after 3 months, and there are limits on that. So they can place holds, but they can only place 3, and they can check out items, but they can only check out 3 items. And that is just because, until we can get them a established or a more permanent profile, we want to keep the privileges, I guess, limited, so to speak. Okay, so we're moving on to registering a patron in Evergreen, and soon we're going to switch gears to working directly in Evergreen itself. Before we register a patron, typically we're going to have them fill out an application in the library, and typically we ask that they have some form of ID or a bill or anything to verify that their address is within our service area limits. We also want to make sure that they don't already have an existing card, because patrons might, they may have a card floating around in the system, but they don't think that they have one because they haven't used it in a really long time. So we always want to do a patron search. And sometimes patrons they move to a different town. So patrons may not understand that they don't need an entirely new card. They just need to update their existing one. So that's why we want to always do a patron search before. Okay, so switching gears, I am now in Evergreen. You should be seeing my Evergreen screen. When we register patrons, there's two quick ways we can do it. One is right from our home screen in the circulation and patrons menu, right here, register new patron, or in our circ dropdown, register patron. When we open this up, there are going to be three different ways to fill out this application form. It's going to default to all fields, but depending on the information your library collects, it may be more efficient for you to switch it to the suggested fields or just the required fields. One of the main differences is collecting information like birthday or a secondary ID, patron preferred language, all of that is available in all fields. I bring that up because not every library asks for a patron's birthday when they are registering them. Some libraries do because they want to give them a profile that aligns within their age group. I'm going to be completely honest with you. Those profiles don't really have any real bearing. They all pretty much operate the same as you'll see when you look at that patron profile grid. A juvenile profile, a teen profile, and an adult profile are all going to have the same privileges. Evergreen does not limit or put any limitations on a profile based on the profile name, meaning that just because it's a juvenile card, Evergreen isn't going to keep that card from checking out adult materials. Um, However, not patrons, libraries do like to keep track of demographics. When we fill out our statistics for our annual report, some libraries really do want to see how many kids are, evolving or growing up with the library. So that's one of the reasons why we do keep those different profiles, even though they essentially are the same. So back to the registration form. Required fields are always going to be highlighted in yellow. And if you try to save without filling them out, Evergreen is going to ask you to not do that. It's going to say, please enter valid values for required fields. So as you fill this out, you're typically going to scan your card. I am not hooked up to a scanner today, so I have to do it the old fashioned way. And my colleague, Lindsay Stratton, who some of you may know, she's our systems librarian. She hates it when people type in barcodes because human error sometimes comes in. Sometimes we mistype barcodes. So do as I say, not as I do in this one specific case. When I scan my barcode, it automatically gets copied into this OPAC staff client username field here. And that's because while these do match each other, they work in different ways. So the barcode is what we as staff use. When a patron comes in to pick up their holds or check out an item, they give us their card, we scan this barcode. Outside of the library, the patron is using the OPAC staff client username. These will typically match each other. However, patrons can edit their OPAC staff client username. So if I was a patron and I saw that that was enabled in the OPAC and I logged in and I want to give myself a little nickname, AP19, I can do that. And sometimes you might see that when you're editing patron profiles, because this is what they're using to log into the OPAC or the app. For this purpose, I'm going to keep this and the barcode field matching. I'm skipping over the password field. If you've registered patrons before, you'll know that when you fill out the daytime phone field, Evergreen automatically copies the last 4 digits of that phone number into this field for you. So you don't have to worry about this. When we're filling out the patrons information like name and address, it is a system-wide policy that we are doing this in all caps, and that's to keep all of the data uniform. And it's helpful because when we're running reports, to see patron information, maybe we want to find patrons that are expired and don't have an email or are going to expire soon and do have an email. Sometimes it's easy for us to pick out who is not in all caps. So we can say, oh, that patron needs to be edited. So I am going to, let's name this patron Lee. Lee Flowers. Also, when you're in the all fields, suggested fields, required fields, it doesn't matter which, you also have the option to fill out preferred names for your patrons. And this is also available in the patrons profile even after you register them. We may have patrons that go by different names other than what their legal name is. And so filling out the preferred first and last name, when you pull their account up and scan their card the next time they're in, their preferred name is what gets displayed. However, do keep in mind that when you print out hold slips for them, it will display their primary name. So keep that in mind. That could be jarring for a patron that's not expecting to see that. Email address. Before I fill this out, I want to talk about what we do if a patron does not want to give their email address. That's typical. Not everybody wants to get emails. I get that. My inbox is incredibly full. When a patron doesn't want to give an email address, it might we might want to fill this out anyway because we see this is a required field. Evergreen won't let me continue if I try and save and nothing's in here. And so I have seen in the past someone writing no, no email. That's not necessary. We can leave that blank for now because if you look over to the right of this field, Evergreen tells you if no email, uncheck the email hold notification under user settings. So if I scroll down just a little bit and I uncheck this email field, it's no longer required, and then I can carry on. Before this was a feature, you would see that no email or no at AOL.com or NA or not applicable in that field. And that's because we now have this option to completely disable it. It's not necessary, and just leave it blank if the patron doesn't want to give you their address. Beneath that is the option for patrons to have their receipts emailed to them by default. So I do think it's worth asking when you're registering them if they'd like that turned on. You can always turn it on or off after the fact as well. And now here we are at the daytime field. So I'm going to put in my office number, and you'll see once I click off, I'm going to scroll up so you can see it happen in real time. Once I click off, you're going to see this update with the last four of my phone number. So Evergreen is automatically doing that for me. The home library. Your home library is going to match your workstation library. So if a patron is standing in your library and you've already looked at their ID, chances are their home library is right where they're supposed to be. We will have instances of patrons coming into the incorrect library from time to time. And in those cases, that would call for a temporary card profile. Essentially, when that happens is we get the registration process started with the expectation that the actual appropriate home library will finish it. So instead of scanning one of my library's barcodes, I'm going to come up with a temporary barcode format. Every library handles this a little bit differently. Some libraries will actually just write temp card, library code, date in it. And that's fine because when that patron goes to the appropriate home library that we've told them, hey, you actually need to go to Bedford Hills Free, not Bedfordville, one of those. That library will update this with the appropriate barcode. But you're also going to give them a temporary profile because we don't want to turn patrons away and say, hey, get out of here, you don't belong here. That's terrible customer service. We want to make sure that they're being welcomed, and we establish a good opinion of the libraries of Westchester. So aside from a temporary barcode, we also give them a temporary profile. And I also do recommend setting that home library as the appropriate library where they should end up. When it comes to these temporary profiles, after you're done, you can print this and you can save it as a PDF, and then you can email it to someone at that library and just, tell the head of CERC, hey, by the way, this patron came in, we started the temporary, we gave them a temporary card, we started this process for you. When they come in, this is who they are. So that way they are aware that this person will be coming in eventually. I'm going to give this person an adult profile, but before I move on, I want to bring your attention to this little red box over here that says 8 patrons with same phone. As we are filling out the registration form, Evergreen is actively looking for duplicate patrons. It's actively making sure this patron does not already exist. If I were to click and see, hey, eight patrons with the same phone number, that seems pretty strange. It's going to open up patron search in a brand new tab, and then it's going to list everyone with that matching phone number. So based on the columns I have, and I can always add more columns to get more information, I can see, oh, it looks like they might be a family. You know, they have the same mailing street, they have the same last name. Okay, maybe they're all related. But this is also an opportunity where I can say, hey, it looks like you might already have a card in this system. Lee is, could be short for, Liana. And this is where we're going to pause and take a look and ask some questions if we need to. User settings. So this is how patrons are notified typically when their holds become available. So default phone number, that's going to be a required field unless I deselect it. And so that is if a patron gets a phone call, but phone calls typically aren't as popular these days because we are currently using ITIVA, which is a automatic phone call, and we are going to be retiring that service soon. Patrons can have more than one notification turned on though. So if a patron wants email and SMS or text message, that is available. And they just have to enter in their cell phone number. And it's perfectly fine if the cell phone number and the daytime phone number are the same. That's all right. And then address. So last but not least, we're going to fill out the address. And I do recommend starting with the zip code because Evergreen, as long as the zip code is a Westchester zip code, Evergreen's going to pretty much fill out everything except the street. And it's going to put it in all caps for you. So all I have to do is put in that street address. And let me just adjust that. Dexter Road. Okay. 150 patrons with the same address. That's a big family. There are certain libraries that do use patron statistical categories. If you're not sure if you should be using them, chances are you don't use them, but that's also a good opportunity for you to ask someone. This is how some libraries do keep track of contract patrons. So like me, I'm a contract patron because I live in Cortland Manor. So contract patron, A contract, adult, J for juvenile. Mount Pleasant has their own, and I believe Rybrook and New York Public. They're not that common, so I don't know them off the top of my head. But this is also a place where you can track cards, institutional cards, non-resident cards, teachers, trustees, and so on. And then you can also, this is a fairly new feature. You can ask if patrons want to opt out of automatic account renewals. So patron account auto renewal opt out. And so they have to say no for that. Okay. If you have more questions about this feature, please send in a help desk ticket because that way I can have Lindsay Stratton send you all of the information. And so you get it, I hate this term, but straight out of the horse's mouth. All right. So I'm just going to copy this barcode because we're going to use it later and I'm going to click save. All right. Questions about patron registration before we move on? Okay, excellent. All right. Just taking a look at our PowerPoint here, and we're doing pretty well. We're on track. Okay, duplicate patrons. So I'm going to go back to my home screen and then I'm going to open up search for patrons. And I can do that from the home screen, search for patron by name or my search dropdown. I can also get there from checkout using this patron search button in the top right corner here. So when we are searching for patrons, whether it's before we register them or maybe we're just looking someone up, and we find that they did slip through the cracks and they did pull one on pull one over on us and they do have a duplicate card, we can merge those. We don't need to delete them. So for example, let's say, yeah, let's do me. Hire Allison Switch. So let's say I am a regular patron and gee whiz, this lady has 3 cards in the system. Well, we are going to start by merging them. We're not going to delete them because it's a little bit of an overkill in this case, especially when Evergreen gives us the option to merge. When we merge patrons, we're going to have 2 profiles side by side, and we're going to have the option to mark one as the lead account. And this is the one that's going to absorb the other one. So do pay attention, and you want to pick the most current one, and that has the most up-to-date information. Now, if their old account has fines in it or checkouts or holds, that's okay. It's going to get merged with the new one. So it's going to get carried over. You don't need to worry about losing any of that data. When you've figured out that this is the correct one, whichever profile it is, you're going to turn on use as lead and you're going to scroll down and you're going to click merge. Then it's going to combine them. I'm not actually going to do that because this is permanent. That's why you want to really take your time and make sure that one, you have the right person side by side, and that this is something that, after you verified this is the same person and you've chosen the correct lead, because this cannot be undone. All right. I don't want to scare you. I just want to stress that we need to make sure of what we're doing in this case. Questions about merging patrons? Okay. All right. So we are going to go into the patron record. So I'm going to make an assumption that we're familiar with working in patron records, and it's okay if you're not. But there's a lot that happens in this patron record outside of just checking out. When we pull patrons up, typically you're going to have their patron summary on the left side of this screen, and this is going to have a lot of the information from the edit tab easily visible for us. So I can quickly at a glance see profile, home library, last activity, when was the last time they used their card. This includes digitally. So you can see an expired account, but depending on the digital resource, it might have let them bypass and get in even though they're expired. So you can see, oh, this person's still using their card. That's interesting. Maybe I should give them a call or send them an email, ask if they'd like me to redo their card for them. You can also see when it was last updated, when it was created, and then going down, any fines they may owe, that will also be displayed in their bills tab, any items out, overdue, long overdue, claims returned, lost, non-cataloged, any holds they have, and then contact information as well. Items out, so not this is a little bit self-explanatory in my opinion, but items out are the items checked out to these patrons. Typically, you're going to see them in the first tab, the items checked out tab. Only when items get an unusual status will they be moved into other special circulations. And what I mean by an unusual status is to pretty much anything other than checked out in this case. Excuse me, I just need to take a sip. I can feel my voice starting to go. Okay. So whenever you see any items in other special circulations, typically it's going to be because it's long overdue. Um, it's been marked lost, whether automatically or by staff. So patrons are notified before their items come due. They get something called a courtesy notice, and typically that gets sent to them 3 days before the due date. Your item is coming due. If the library, the checkout library, has automatic renewals, that item will automatically renew on its due date. And then they'll get another courtesy notice when it's time to bring it back. If they miss that due date, they will get another courtesy notice 7 days past due date. Then they'll get one, I believe, 21 days past due date. And then when the item is 30 days past the due date, it becomes lost automatically. And then that patron will automatically get charged for the full price of that item. If the book is returned, that charge reverts back to just the overdue fees if it's checked out at a library that does charge overdue fees. But patrons are still charged for lost items even if they check out at a fine-free library. You'll also see items that have a missing status or a damaged status in here as well. Non-catalog, we typically don't see too often. We would expect to see pre-cat items in here, but that's not always the case. If you're unfamiliar, a pre-cat item happens when you're checking out to a patron and the barcode is not fully picked up by the scanner. And so Evergreen is going to put this alert on your screen. It's going to say this item was misscanned or it's not cataloged, and it's going to give you the option to fill out a pre-cat record, pre-catalog record. And the idea is Evergreen wants to make this checkout seamless. Even though there was a hiccup with the barcode, it wants you to check this item out to the patron so you can carry on and help the next person. Don't fill this out the first time. What you want to do is click cancel and you want to try scanning that barcode again. And then if it's still not picking up, then you can fill it out and try to include as much information as you can. So the book title, the author, ISBN, if you can read the barcode, include that, because when that item eventually comes back, it has to go to your tech services department and they have to edit that. Okay, items out. We also have our holds tab here. So if patrons have any holds, they will be listed here. And you can also see recently canceled holds. So if there are recently canceled holds here, they will hang out typically about 30 days. However, sometimes you will see them in here longer. You can always on cancel them as long as they are displayed in here, and that will automatically move them back into the open hold request. Bills. So if you are a library that charges fees or even if you're not, if you're a fine free library and your patron is getting charged for a book, they are going to, as long as if it's $25 or more, they're automatically going to have a block placed on their account. And one of the easiest ways is to just pay the bill. Some libraries prefer patrons pay the full bill, and if it's for a lost item, you should be paying that in full or accepting full payment. In the case of overdue fines or fees, that's where some libraries may be a little bit more lenient, and maybe they're okay with just paying a little bit towards it, while others may prefer that they pay the full price. So if you're not sure which one applies to you, just ask. And then we're moving on to the notes tab. So the notes tab, this is where we can apply notes, alerts, or we can apply blocks ourselves to patrons. So to do any of those three, you're going to open up that create note button, and it's going to default to note. So before you fill out the title of the note and the note text, the penalty type drop down is going to default to note no blocks. But you can say alerting note no blocks, alerting block on circ, hold, or renew. And that's typically just telling you how these three work. So a note is not going to be as visible as an alert. So if we're going to just say test for this one, and the depth is going to also default to everywhere. So this patron, even though this note is being created at WS, if they were to walk into Croton, if a library staff opens up this page, they can see this note. If you want something a little bit more visible in the patron's account, then you're going to want to use an alert. So an alert is going to draw the staff's attention because it's going to turn the patron's name bright red, and this alert is going to display underneath that. So again, I'm going to say test, and I can also choose to limit this. I can choose to limit it with the note as well. So as I said, it defaults to everywhere, but if I want it to only be my local consortium, so a local consortium is going to apply to a library that has one or more branches. Local library system would be just the location, like the local library system is, if we're using Yonkers as an example, Yonkers has three branches, Riverfront, Will, and Crestwood. The local consortium would be all three of those branches. And then I believe the local library system would be like the main branch. So in that case, it would be Riverfront. And then local library branch, I believe, is like narrowing it down to just one or two. Typically, though, when we're putting alerts in patron accounts, we're leaving it set to everywhere. You don't have to worry about turning patron visible on because this no longer applies to the catalog or apps that we are currently using. But once upon a time, patrons were able to see the messages that we left them. Okay, and see that is where it displays. If you want to get rid of any of these, you can always just select them and open your actions menu and remove them, or you can always edit them too. Archiving them is going to just move them down into the archive notes section. And it will disable them too. So it depends on what the message was conveying. An alert, or no, excuse me, not an alert, a block is going to block circ, hold, and renewal when it's a manually entered block. So when a patron reaches a threshold, they can still place holds. But when a staff is applying a block to a patron card, they cannot. So if you were to ever look yourself up in Evergreen, and I will show you, I'm going to use Patty. Alerting block on circ and hold, because this is Patty's Evergreen username. This isn't a real account. So whenever we are creating Evergreen accounts for new staff, we're applying this block so they don't accidentally use it to place a hold or check out materials. But it can be applied to regular patrons as well. Are there any questions about this? All right. Before I move on to edit and triggered events, I just want to take a look at Stephanie's comment. If the lost damaged item is owned by a different library, should one still try to settle the bill, or do they have to settle it with the owning library? So typically, if you're on shore, you can call the owning library. It depends. It depends. However, if it's checked out at your location, you should be the first to try to rectify the situation. So if your patron got a book from Chappaqua or yeah, and they lose it, you can accept payment and you can send the payment to Chappaqua, but you're going to send it in an envelope and you're going to give them a call beforehand and let them know. Um, However, it's because it's we've talked about this at the circulation committee meetings before, and it's just not helpful to say send the patron to the owning library. One, because the patron might just, think that's too difficult to, go to a different location and they might just give up and be like, this is too complicated. I'm never setting foot in a library again. Good luck ever getting this book paid for. That's not outside the realm of possibility. So if we can have that conversation with the patron, we can accept that payment and then forward it on to the owning library. But you always want to be in communication with the owning library and let them know, hey, we've already talked to them. They're going to bring in a check, they're going to bring in cash, and we'll mail it to you. Does that help answer your question, Stephanie?
Yes, thank you so much.
Oh, yeah, you're welcome. Okay. Now the edit tab. So anytime a patron's account needs to be updated, this is where we're going to go. So I want to talk about what happens when a patron loses their card. If a patron loses their library card, we can click replace barcode. And I don't want to do it to myself. So we're going to switch gears and we're going to go to our friend Lee Flowers that we just registered not too long ago. 000-781-7 Okay. So Lee comes in and they lost their library card. So what we're going to do is we're going to click replace and then we are going to scan in their brand new library card. Some libraries charge for replacement cards. So if that applies to you, you're going to also create a bill for that. But you're not done. It's not just scanning the new card. You also have to make sure that you are copying and pasting it into the OPAC staff client username because you want the barcodes to match. If it's a barcode, you want the barcodes to match, right? But if you see that a patron has like a unique username in here, like that AP19 example I used earlier, you can leave that alone, but you want to just copy and paste the new barcode into that field. You can also use this see all button here to see how many library cards this patron has gone to. So, two library cards, that's not terrible. I've seen patrons that had like 5 or 6 here, and it's like, okay, maybe that patron just needs to, wear it in a lanyard around their neck, or have it as a keychain so they stop losing it. But I bring this up because these are now linked to each other. These barcodes are linked. So even though this is now the active and primary barcode, the one that we registered earlier is still tied to this account. And because we can't delete an old barcode. So if a patron finds that missing card and brings it in, we can't delete it because if we delete one of these barcodes, we're deleting all of them together. I know it's not ideal, I know, but that has been pretty much the way we've been operating since 2019 when we migrated to Evergreen. Now, there are going to be very rare exceptions of when we revert back to a patron's old card. And I'm going to be very honest with you. That is up to Lindsay and I's discretion and whether or not we would allow that. So, should you ever face a scenario where a patron finds their old library card and they're begging to have that reinstated as their primary active card, you can submit a help desk ticket, and Lindsay or I will let you know if it can be done. But I just want to communicate that we can't delete the old barcodes. We can't reuse old barcodes either when it comes to patrons because they're tied to current active accounts.
So if a patron comes in, we scan the card and we get a message that says account use found using an inactive card.
The account retrieved with an active
Yes.
card. I'm
Yes.
so glad you brought that up because let me show you what happens because that does happen sometimes, right?
Yes.
So we're going to leave. I'm scanning the old barcode. I'm submitting it and it pulls up her account. But typically, actually, this isn't a good example because I wonder, I never saved. Let me finish. Let me save that and then redo that. Okay, save. Save. Okay. Copy the old one, cancel, check out. All right. Lee's name is highlighted. Wasn't highlighted before. And if I go to scan a barcode, I can't. It will not let me. So if I'm at the circ desk, something's wrong here. I'm not going to panic. I'm not going to freak out. What I'm going to do is I'm going to look at the card in my hand and I'm going to compare it to what is labeled and displayed in the profile. And I can say, oh, these don't match. Let's verify. Let's go into the edit tab and click the see all. And so I can see, okay, you've used an old card. We can't use this anymore. Do you have the current card on you? If they say I don't have it on me, but I know where it is. I know it's on, it's on the desk at home. You can copy and paste the current card and then check out with that. But I don't recommend giving the old card back because it was so easy for them to just hand it over. So if you're willing to have a conversation about, let's I'll take care of this old library card for you. Just remember to bring the new one next time you come in. And then throw them out, cut them up, whatever.
But do the inactive cards go away? I mean, you showed us merging cards, but this is a different.
This is different. This
Yeah.
is different because this patron just replaced their barcode. They didn't get an entirely new account created for them. So merging is if I have two separate library cards. So if I have an Ardsley card and a Mount Vernon card, because I lived in both those towns and I registered at both those libraries and I fell through the cracks. You merge them together. So now I only have the one. Completely different from just replacing the barcode. So, which that is a great question because it can be confusing.
Thank you.
Yes, of course. Also, another common phone call or question from patrons is they're trying to log into Libby and it's asking for a PIN and I don't know what the heck my PIN is. I don't like what is that? Because typically when you give them their card, it says nothing about a PIN on it. Some libraries have little brochures that explain, all of the great things you get with your library card. Sometimes it explains the PIN, but not always. And that's okay for them not to know. So it is a good practice when you're registering patrons to let them know, hey, by the way, if you're asked for a PIN, it's the last four of your phone number. If you get that phone call and they say, and you tell them it's the last four of their phone number and they're trying and it's not working, all you have to do is copy the last four of their daytime phone number, paste it in there and save. I promise you, 9 times out of 10, that solves the issue. After verifying there's nothing wrong with the account itself, right? We want to make sure that they haven't met their thresholds, they're not expired. Typically, it's because the pin just needs to be re-updated for whatever reason. And copying and pasting the last four will usually fix that issue. Okay. Scrolling down, actually, I want to go back up to replacing the barcode. So when you're updating a patron's profile because they moved to your service area, so let's say, I did live in Ardsley, but then I moved to Katona. I don't need an entirely new profile created. I just need my existing one updated. So that would be another reason to replace that barcode here, because every library has their own unique library barcode prefixes, right? So these numbers are associated with each of our libraries. And so when a patron is online or they're placing holds, Evergreen is looking at their barcode and matching it to the location. So that's another reason for replacing a barcode, is if a patron changes their home library. In that event, you're also going to be updating their home library too. So like I said, I moved from Ardsley to Katona. I'm going to switch that. Katona, there you are. And then I'm also going to update their address as well, and maybe any other information that needs updating. Okay. Smart as, oh, and then expiration date. So if patrons aren't auto renewed, we do need to update their expiration date for them. So just clicking this update expiration date is going to push them 3 years ahead from today's date, right? But you also have the option to, you can always type that date in yourself as well. I'm not charging. There we go. All right. Okay. Are there any questions about editing a patron's record? All right. And then the last thing I want to show you while we're in the patron's record is the triggered events and notifications. So there's two categories for triggered events. There's patron specific and item specific. When we're in a patron's profile and we're looking at a triggered event log, it's going to break it down into circulations or holds. Now, there's not going to be anything here because we just registered Lee today. But if I were to pull up one of my dummy patrons, it's not very nice, but I love calling them that because they're not real. They're all used for testing. Let's use D. This is going to show me a breakdown of how this patron was getting notified for their holds or their circulations. So holds is going to tell me how they're getting notified, when they got notified, and was it successful? Did it actually go through? Because it's sometimes patrons will say, well, like, I never got the phone call, I never got the email, and it's not fair. You put the book back on the shelf or you sent it back. How was I supposed to know it was ready? Well, we can go and we can see, we can go into their profile and we can open up the triggered event log and switch it to the holds tab, and we can find the hold and we can say, actually, that email did go through on November 10th at 2:11. Did you check your spam folder? We can also say, oh yeah, no, that text message, that went through. We also, when it comes to text message notifications, we use a software called MessageBee. Lindsay and I can log into the dashboard of MessageBee, and we can also verify whether or not that message went through to that patron too. If that's ever an issue for you, that is a help desk ticket that you can send in. Now, this one doesn't have any triggered events for circulation, and I would like you to see what that looks like. So let's see if I can find that in one of my other dummies. Allison demo perhaps. Let's see. Yes, okay. So the circulation trigger events, this is going to show me if my patron is being notified about the due date coming. So this is the 3-day pre-due courtesy notice. That email went through. It says it was complete. Did it auto renew? It sure did. And then after it was auto renewed, Allison didn't bring it back. And I got that 7-day overdue email notification. Now, if these did not go through and make it, instead of complete, this would say invalid. And so I could say, oh, yeah, no, it looks like it didn't get to you. Let's take a look and make sure that your notification preferences are up to date. Let's verify your phone number. Let's verify your email. My apologies. Okay, questions about triggered events? Okay. I thought of something. There is one more thing I want to talk about before we talk about expired patrons. So if I scroll down in the patrons edit screen, right above user settings, there is an active selection box and a barred selection box. Typically, they're always going to see active here. The only time you're really going to see this deselected is because someone turned it off. And it's because we want that patron to be included in the next batch deletion. Evergreen has scheduled batch deletions to purge and remove expired patrons that haven't used their card over an X amount of time. And deselecting active kind of helps speed that process up. Also, adjusting the expiration date. So this patron has been expired for a couple of years. Evergreen should be looking at that expiration date. But for example, if someone tells me, I'm moving to California and I'm never coming back, can you please take care of my my patron profile? Can you please delete it from your system? I can absolutely do that. And I'm going to speed it up by adjusting this and like reverting it back to like 2 years ago and deselecting that. You don't have to worry about that from where you guys are, but that's part of, the process. What I want to talk about is this barred option. A bar is going to be a more extreme block on a patron's account. And this is going to be used very rarely. And it's pretty much this patron has burnt every bridge, and we do not want to service them anymore. Because a block, as I've mentioned, if Evergreen is placing that block on the account, they can still place holds. They can still use Libby. They can still, they can still use their card online. But when a patron is barred, they can't use their card at all. They're going to be prevented from placing holds, and they're going to be prevented from using digital services because we're pretty much saying you're done. Until whatever is rectified, you're done here. Now, this really isn't used all that often. I'm actually very happy to say that you do not see this too much from where I'm standing. But that's what that means, because I do get questions there. Any questions from you about patrons' profiles and edits being made? Okay. Cool. Right. And let's just go. We'll talk about expired patrons, and then we'll talk about, I think there will still be enough time to talk about patrons' reading history and what patrons can do on their own. So expired patrons. as part of that batch deletion process, Evergreen is looking at a couple of things to make sure that that patron profile qualifies for deletion. So it wants to look at when they expired. So if a patron expired 18 months ago, and there's no outstanding circulation bills or open holds. So they don't have anything checked out. They don't have any holds. There are no fees or fines in their account. This will be flagged as deleted, and it's a very clean process. And it's just, okay, bye. But then there are certain other fun little things that pop up. So what happens to patron accounts that have expired 18 months ago or 24 months ago, but they do owe fines, or they do have open circulations, or they do have holds? Well, Evergreen is going to flag them, but it's not going to get rid of them as quickly as the one that doesn't have anything in their account. So, for example, expired patron records with less than $25, but no lost items are purged when the account has been expired for 24 months or more. There are no open circs with a stop fines clause of lost. That means there are no lost items checked out to them. The bills are less than $25. There's no holds. It hasn't already been purged from the system. Because patron records with unresolved lost issues will never get purged. So that's why it is a good idea to be running some reports every so often at your library to check for expired patron records that do have items marked lost, or do owe more than $25, or do have open hold requests. Allison, how do I know which reports to run? If you're not familiar with running reports, I don't want you to freak out. Reports can be a little intimidating if you're not familiar or comfortable with it. If you want to get comfortable with it, give me a call, send me an email, and we'll have a one-on-one to get you there. But in the shared templates, there's an evergreen.reports folder and a patron subfolder, and it has a ton of reports to help you find information that you may be looking for. So this, if I have it set to only show me 10 rows, if I expand that a little bit, let's go. Okay, this might not be in this folder, but this is helpful for you to know, because this is also where you can get reports. If you want to know what patrons don't have email addresses, you can run a report for that. Or if you want to run a report for patrons that are going to expire in the next 3 to 6 months, and they do have email address, and then you want to do a promotional, hey, come to the library and renew your card and get a bookmark, get a button, get a book. You can run a report to get a list of all of those patrons, and so you can email blast them. You can get a list of patrons with preferred names. So how many patrons actually are using this feature? How popular is that? The expired patrons. Let's see if we can just search that real quick. Expired patrons. Okay. Deleted patron lists all patron records that have been deleted but not completely purged. So this was in that folder. This includes old accounts that have been expired for 2 years with no lost materials that are automatic deleted on the second Wednesday of each month, starting August 13th, 2025. So that's when the batch deletions happen. And accounts staff have deleted using a patron bucket. Deleted patron records are completely purged after 1 month. So there is a feature called a user bucket. I have information on that in the IT Wiki if you're curious about learning that. You can delete patrons in a user bucket, but it does not completely purge them from the system until Evergreen has its automatic purge on that monthly basis. So that's what that is clarifying. All right, back to expired patrons. All right. Okay. Any questions about this process? Okay. All right, we are at 2:15, so that's wonderful. That's perfect. So I want to talk about, we've been focused on the staff side of things. Let's talk about the patron's actual experience with the ILS and using the library system. So patrons, their access to the ILS is primarily going to be through the app or the catalog. Every library has their own branded version of the catalog. And when they are logged into the catalog with their card, they have the option to create reading lists. They can save their reading history. So it's something that they have to opt into, but it's going to record anything that they check out. Because from our side of things, we as staff can only see what's currently checked out to a patron. And then in item status, we can see who had it last within that 30-day period before that gets deleted. But patrons can retain that for as long as they want. Let's just log in real quick. Let's sign out from there and sign in. Okay. So I am logged in as a patron. This is the account, my account. And so I also get a little profile on the left side of my screen that gives me a rundown. And this will show me what I have checked out, whether it's a physical material or if it's checked out in Libby or in Hoopla. Any items I have on hold, I can see them listed. And so it will say what's ready for pickup and then what's pending. And so I can see the reason why this is still pending is because I suspended this, but when I activate my hold, I am going to be number 5 in line. The queue position in the catalog, in the OPAC, the patron catalog, is correct. I bring that up because there's a bug in the staff client in Evergreen. When you're in the patron's account, in their holds tab, let's use retrieve patron. Boop, boop, boop. The queue position in the patron's account is going to show them as being number 1, and that's not typically the case. But from the patron side of things, this is going to be correct for them, okay? So if you have a patron standing in front of you and you pull up their account and you say, oh, it looks like you're number 1 for all of them, that might not necessarily be true. To really get a sense of where they are in the queue position, go into the actual title record by clicking on the title and then go into the view holds tab. This is going to actually show them where they are. And like, oh, look, she actually was number 1. So, hey, that's nice. Okay. Patrons can also rate titles, and in rating titles and saying whether or not they're interested in them, they can get titles recommended to them in the catalog as well. They can create reading lists, so they can add as many titles to a list as they want, and then they can also save their searches, and then they can opt into their reading history. And they can delete one by one, or they can delete everything in their reading history. But if they opt in to stop recording my reading history, I'm going to zoom in real quick. Can somebody read this for me? This says opt out of reading history. Opting out of reading history will also delete your entire reading history irreversibly. Proceed. And if I click opt out, My reading history isn't there anymore. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Why isn't my reading history there anymore? You can unmute yourself. You can talk. You can put it in the chat.
Well, you chose to delete it
Yeah.
irreversible.
Yes, I'm being a little obtuse about that because I have gotten some tickets from librarians saying, "Well, I was trying to show a patron what would happen if I clicked that, but how do I get my reading history back now?" And it's like, well, you gave it permission to delete it all. So I want to just be clear about that when I'm showing that to you. Okay. All right. So we are at 221. I think I've covered everything on my outline that I wanted to share with you. So I want to give you guys the opportunity to ask any questions, even if it doesn't necessarily have to be related to Evergreen patrons. Any Evergreen related questions, I'm happy to answer or go over with you.
I have a couple of questions.
Sure.
I do processing for ILL books that come in,
Mm-hmm.
and there's no connection between those books coming in and Evergreen. Is there ever a possibility that there will be a way? I mean, I usually put an alert onto a patron's account to say that there's an ILL that's come in. It's going to be on the shelf until the 20th. Um, we
It is the receiving library's responsibility to call that patron.
we do, of course,
Okay.
but another clerk doesn't know there's necessarily an ILL for a patron because it
Oh,
doesn't
so
show as a
Oh, so if
hold.
a patron is coming up to, let's say, like pick up like actual holds from the library, and so they only grab what's on the hold shelf, not thinking to look where ILLs might be. Like, is that
Well,
what you mean? So
you
like,
just don't see it as a hold unless I put a note on or another clerk. There are only two of us who process them. Um,
uh, honestly, I'm gonna say right now the answer is no to that
okay,
because those items just aren't in our catalog at all, so
okay,
they
I
can't be
understand.
captured for a hold.
I got it. Thank you.
Yeah.
And you said that that the phone system will be retiring the phone call to patrons.
Yes.
We particularly have older patrons who use their home number for everything and don't
Hmm.
provide emails. So I'm a little concerned.
I think so. I don't have a date for you for when that's going to happen, but that is a perfectly good opportunity for you to have your director have a conversation with your director. And so they can reach out to the IT help desk because I think based on usage, it hasn't made sense from WLS's perspective to pay for a service that is being underutilized.
Right.
So if there is a need for it, then we need to hear about it.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Are there any other questions or comments? Okay. How's everyone feeling about Evergreen patrons?
Good.
Good, good. I know a lot of this information, it might be repetitive or redundant, especially if, you're used to doing this every day. But like I said, sometimes it's good to just kind of hear, maybe validate that what you're doing or what you know is the correct way to be doing it. Now, if any questions come to you later on, please do not hesitate to reach out, ask your questions. You can always submit a help desk ticket. You can email the help desk. Our support at wlsmail.org is you can create a ticket through email. You have my email address now through the reminder. So you can always reach out to me that way also, and then I can turn your email into a help desk ticket. Um, I will be sending this recording and the handout to you like I said, probably not today, but definitely before the end of the week. And if you have, like I said, if you have any questions or you need help with anything, please do not hesitate to reach out to me. So with that being said, I'm going to stop recording and I will stick around just a little bit in case anybody